Hello friends! The family of Krzysztof and Kinga from Lubaczow, the southeastern city of Poland, have always been kind people, and even despite having successful careers, they always tried to take some time off to unwind. They worked in similar fields. He was an engineer and she was an architect. Their conversations often included discussions of their work. The couple also loved taking walks to the city and talking about all the architectural styles, unusual buildings, longingly looking at the old houses that were awaiting their miserable fate, a complete destruction. And the hobbies of this couple would probably be of no interest to anyone if it weren't for the events that we'll talk about now. The thing is that Krzysztof and Kinga have long taken a liking to an old house that was located near the forest and was falling apart. The young people thought that it was abandoned, but that was until they were walking by one day and saw an old woman coming out of it. To say that the couple was surprised would be an understatement. The building was in such bad shape that it was hard to imagine that people could live there. Actually, the young couple couldn't stop thinking about what they saw for several days, so eventually they decided to pay a visit to the inhabitants of this house. And that's how the young couple met Mrs. Aniela, whose further life was divided into before and after meeting the young couple. As it turned out, 80-year-old Aniela had been living in the small one-room house for many years. The house had no electricity, running water, or gas. Initially, Krzysztof and Kinga planned on bringing the old woman some basic necessities: clothes, firewood, and food. However, upon arriving at the house, the young couple saw the deplorable conditions the old woman had to live in. According to Krzysztof, her house resembled some fairy tale witch's hut. The couple couldn't have even imagined that some house still existed in the modern world, let alone that people were living in them. There was literally bare earth under the floor of the house, some concrete on the front door, and one window through which so little light entered the room that it was dark there even during the day. There was an old bar near the house, which looked like it was about to fall apart. And in the midst of it all, there stood a lonely old woman who happily waved her hand at the uninvited guests. She was simply glad to see people, as they didn't come by often. Nevertheless, the old woman turned out to be a rather cheerful and pleasant person, who never despaired and even adapted to her difficult living conditions. Moreover, there was nothing she could do about it herself, because she was living off pension, which was barely enough for firewood and medication. She didn't have any relatives or close friends, and her health was getting worse by the day. All of this made a very strong impression on the young couple. And then the old woman shared her dream with them. Mrs. Aniela really wanted to get a dog to fill the emptiness of the house, as she could no longer handle living in such silence. And so the young people realized that they had to get involved. Thus, having learned the touching story of the poor old woman who was forced to live out her life in a ruined house all alone, the couple decided to make every effort to change her living conditions for the better. Maybe someone else would have stopped at offering words of support, but Krzysztof and Kinga decided they needed to do much more. They started off by bringing the old woman food and firewood. It went on for some time, and then the couple became close to Aniela because the woman was very open and sincere. Every day, the woman would wait for a visit from her new friends, unsuspecting that the young couple already came up with an idea of how to help her, which they would soon implement. The truth was that while paying the old woman their daily visits, the couple was also working on a preliminary project for the renovations of the old house, and when it was ready, the young people started raising funds for it. They managed to find some like-minded people, both among their friends and people they didn't know, and when they finally raised enough money to buy the construction materials, they got down to business. Thus, one fine morning, Mrs. Aniela woke up to see a bunch of people unloading construction materials and various tools at her house. The old woman couldn't understand what was happening, but Krzysztof calmed her down, saying that her house would soon look a lot better. The construction crew included many compassionate people who were willing to donate their time. They spent the first 3 days building a new roof. Then they sheathed the house with wood to keep the heat inside so the winters wouldn't be so cold, and also installed a new door. And this was just the beginning. There was enough money to install new windows, as well as to install all the wiring and even make the place look pretty. Kinga and Krzysztof stood in embrace and watched the end result, but the most valuable gift was sitting at their feet. A faithful friend, taken from a shelter, was waiting to meet his new owner and was ready to envelop her in his love and warmth, joyfully wagging his tail and sniffling his new home. For the duration of the repairs, the old lady stayed with the couple at their place. And when the renovations were done and she saw her new home, she burst into tears because she couldn't even believe her eyes. The entire team that worked on Mrs. Aniela's house came to support the old lady and help her get settled into her new home. The old woman couldn't come to her senses for a long time. She touched every millimeter of the new house and sighed happily, while the four-legged friend who suddenly appeared at her feet only made the situation even more emotional. The young couple hopes that what they did will help restore the old woman's faith in humanity and maybe serve as an example for others. This story has a beautiful ending. The young couple got a grandmother, and Mrs. Aniela got 2 wonderful grandchildren. The young couple stayed in touch with Mrs. Aniela and visits her often, bringing her food and medications. It seems that this story couldn't have gotten a better ending. Friends, how do you feel about what this young couple did? Be sure to share your thoughts in the comments. And that's probably all for today. Rate the video if you liked it, and see you soon.